the festival, and she's not been able to be with us today. Tell us the vision that the Belgian entity for the management has as regards to the new model that has not been implemented, neither has it been developed, and this has an important impact for the different headlines and films. After both speakers finish, there will be a QA, and then we prepared a cocktail for all of you in Mineo, the restaurant, which is as you leave on your right. Thank you very much for being here again, once again. And I leave you with the two representatives we have today. Thank you very much. Hi, good afternoon to all of you. I'm going to be quite brief. I'm going to go over a series of points, unfortunately, obvious, evident issues that we've repeated many, many times. The sad thing is that we have to repeat them time and time again. The creators should be paid like any other worker for their work. This sounds obvious, but we have to continue to say so. And the compensation per private copy is the part of payment that the creator should receive. And I repeat, this is evident, but I think, unfortunately, the situation is such that we have to continue to read. Compensation by private copy has been paid in the Spanish law since 1992 to the payment of cultural creation. Compensation per private copy is the payment of a private nature that should be paid by the manufacturing and importing companies that carry out musical reproduction, audiovisual, as well as literary reproduction. These are the companies that take benefit of the commercialization of these teams, of the equipment, or whatever is used, whatever is reproduced. The management entity, neither the creator, we don't want to depend upon a tax or the general state budget. That's not our will, to be paid when our obligation in Europe falls upon technology manufacturers. Throughout Europe, it's paid by the technology manufacturers. In Spain now, in this situation, we depend upon the public administration in that sense. Private copy is a private payment paid by those companies that enrich themselves, manufacturing equipment and apparatus that reproduce third parties, the producers, the authors, and the rights holders. It shouldn't be a model that where the payment should be paid by all citizens indiscriminately, and even more so, according to European law, the state shouldn't take charge of a compensation which corresponds to the technology companies and firms. That's one of the points. Maintain the contribution of 4% of the GDP in Spain of cultural industry, and to continue to generate employment in the sector are only possible protecting and defending the rights of the creators. Payment per private copy allows us to promote Spanish cinema. If we eliminated, like now, the collaboration with festivals, the payment of medical insurance to the fight against piracy, we would stop the business. We would stop existing. The Europe and Spain, we defend private copy. And we claim to the Spanish government establishing the previous system and respect the rights of the creators and the cultural industries. Summarizing the key points, I would say that neither the management entities or creators, we don't want to depend upon a tax or the general state budget. Private activities should be paid for by private resources and not with public money, especially at this present moment of an economic crisis. And the new model doesn't benefit anyone. In the previous model, the state didn't pay 215 million that the administration calculated to the damage made to private property, maintaining 4% of GDP in the cultural industry, and to continue to generate employment, only protecting and defending the rights of the creators of culture. Payment per private company allows us to promote Spanish cinema, and if we eliminate it like now, the collaboration with festivals like now would stop existing, cease to exist. As a summary of a headline, we could say the state doesn't bear in mind the creators of culture, nor the safety and security of these creators. That's what we wanted to mention, basically, in short. Does a microphone work? I'm going to speak in French. Excuse me for doing so. I speak many languages, but not Spanish. It's a mistake, obviously, in a world in which Spain and Latin America undoubtedly are very important. Latin America which is a continent which I love as much as Spain. I hope I can resolve this linguistic flaw. But before talking about private copies, I would like to express how in our society, how we contemplate this problem of payment of private and how we see this Spanish situation. And first, I would like to express my solidarity with Spanish filmmaking and cinema, which is going through moments and very difficult moment. It's going through a very difficult moment at present. To avoid public subsidies to cinema, increase VAT in cinemas are now practically suppressing a resource which is a state resource, as we said before, vis-a-vis private copies. There's a 115 million we're talking about for all of the authors and artists and producers, because people copy things. I think this is a policy which is null and void, which is completely absurd. And unfortunately, I have followed closely the case in our colleagues in Italy, Italian cinema, which is going through a similar situation with a government. Well, Berlusconi, we've had him for 5 or 10 years. Well, even in the Venice Film Festival, it's quite clear that they've gone through a very serious situation throughout all of Italy. And it's a solution which was never being able to be resolved. Italian cinema has been the victim of a governmental policy which has weakened the cinema industry, and they've not been able to overcome that situation. And this is happening, unfortunately, in another country due to the political elections and choices taken by the governments, and I think that this is very serious. And plus, it may have short and mid-term consequences, which are also serious, in a moment in which all of the countries are concerned with the soft power, the idea through which the cultural industries transmit messages, cultural messages, and political messages of a country. I'm thinking about Canada, for example, in France, in the US. Those powers are very powerful. And it seems surprising to say that the situation of Spanish cinema was so vital and alive, and which has so much to tell the world. This situation is very unfortunate. But let's talk about private copies. First of all, Spain has always been has a lot of solidarity with us. I have to talk about when I was young. I talk about and to fight that struggle in Brussels in a violent environment, and the cultural exception meant that we wanted there to be freedom of creation in commercial creations. And I asked different filmmakers to back us up because their voice can be heard. We held a conference. I remember as if it were yesterday. Fernando Trueba came along from Spain, and without even questioning the fact, these are acts which I believe are very important. I think that our associations that manage private copies in Germany, in France, in Sweden, in Holland, in Denmark, in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in Italy, Switzerland, also these former Eastern countries like in Romania, for example, all of us, what we want to do is to achieve solidarity, to work together and to back up our Spanish producers and colleagues. And obviously, it's quite clear you're victims. We consider, well, I don't want to give any moral judgment here, but there was a payment for all of the rights, which was 115 million, which was redistributed in benefit of authors, the artists, the actors, and not only Spanish, but for example, when the French films are copied in a Spanish chain of cinema, even when Spanish are copied in France or in Germany, well, at that moment, we operate by reciprocally. They say we pay the Spanish films copied in France or in Germany or in any other country, and in the same way our Spanish colleagues, they go back, they use that money for the films copied in Spain, and in turn they go back to the producers, the beneficiary, the artists and the authors whose films are who work is copied. It's a simple mechanism that works very well, extremely well. And as of 15 years ago now, we've created an association which is called Eurocopia, which is destined to get together every 3 months to talk about the situation in every different country, to see how those private copies, how they work, the private copies, and also through this association, we also want to improve how it operates. So everything is as clear as possible so they begin the greatest amount of justice for the people, the rights holders. So therefore this type of copy is very interesting. I think Europe, that's how we've created it. We think through people who work vis-a-vis very specific around very specific projects and companies, but adding all of these companies and firms at a European level, that's how we will make Europe exist in one way or another. Obviously, what's going to happen with 5 million euros? Is that what the government wants to provide? Well, we think that's pittance, really, but the fact charity or pittance isn't public policy, is it? Not at least not in the 21st century that we're living in. What are we going to be able to do at this level? Well, I think that we should do something with a certain European agreement. What's going to happen with the exchange of copies? With regards France and Spain, undoubtedly, how to say this, administers its cinema less vis-a-vis France, and I can see companies like Hereda had a certain presence in Latin America, and it carried out a very important work, not only to administer private copies, but also for copyright and to create position and to inform the authors and producers, the holders, shall we say, to inform them of their rights. In South America, this is not as obvious. I know that their work is to the right payment, but also the work is lobbying, the work of informing and training people, which I thought to be quite extraordinary. It's an added element, shall we say. It's a plus for Spanish cultural production, a plus for Spain, shall we say. Now I see that all of this is at risk. And it's running the risk of not being able to go ahead and continue. And that's the first observation, my sadness vis-a-vis the situation. And as I've said before, when there are films copied in France or Belgium or Germany or any other country, we identify the film, we identify the audience, and we set a payment figure according to this. And subsequently, each company, be it German, France, or German or whatever, it gives it back to the producers those amounts for those private copies in the different countries, and then it redistributes it to the producers. Well, we are going to continue to do the same thing. We in Germany, in France, and in Belgium, where for the time being there's no doubt along these lines, Friday we're going to hold a meeting, or a working meeting, and on the 6th we held a meeting with different delegates. No one said, well, we're not going to pay Spain, because Spain, well, we've got 115 million euros, and the things aren't too clear at the present moment, but supposedly all of this is going to be reduced to 5 million. Well, this means that the country, from my point of view, is going to be in a desperate situation, but we're going to continue to pay because it's a duty that we have vis-a-vis Spanish creation of cinema and culture, because we're going to do it because the times for Spanish creators is now, and directors, we shouldn't abandon Spanish directors or creators. We've got to help them, and also at a European level. That's where perhaps I'm going to try to be useful. We're also going to try make people aware and convince the European Commissioner in charge of intellectual property, Monsieur Mardier, but also the members of the Parliament, European Parliament, who are also in charge. They are the legislators, so they are truly responsible, aren't they, in the field of how they write the texts related to intellectual property. That's to make them aware, because we believe that the Spanish government, from a legal standpoint, we believe that it's mistaken. It's not right. I think it's mistaken, and they're wrong. the moment in which in the law you register or stipulate the principle of private copy, the principle according to which the law recognizes that people copy, and it's true that people copy, and they copy a lot. They copy films that subsequently they see and consume at home. We can't oppose ourselves to this, and we don't oppose ourselves, but the legislators have they've said, okay, people copy authors, artists, producers, and so therefore that's why they should be paid for this, which is a forfeit, which is never going to cover the real price of consuming a film, which is very expensive to make. So therefore, this principle was set up in the 1960s, and now in certain countries, the payment is perceived vis-a-vis computers and hard drives or hard disks, because technology evolves and allows us to copy with other methods. People can store or see a film live because there is equipment that allows you to do this, but people continue to copy, and they could simply just connect and look live. But no, people continue to like to copy. It continues to be a very important event within the area of authors' rights. We believe, or copyright, the Spanish government, I don't know how to say this, leaving to one side the principle of private copy and the recognition of what a private copy is, it's not something that they deny. It's not being denied by the government, but on the contrary, the government doesn't respect all of this logic, because initially, if this is in the law, well, it has to be paid for. Obviously, it has to be paid for associated to it, and that payment shouldn't be paid through taxes. It should be paid by the person who makes the copy, and whoever makes the copy is the audience in this case. But we're not asking the audience, but we're asking the people that gives them the means to copy. In general, before they were cassettes, importers, or people who manufactured video cassettes in European countries. But now there are a lot of importers of other types of materials, because that type of support is not produced anymore or manufactured anymore. And there's another type of industrialists that supply them, like, for example, PC manufacturers or other devices of this nature. So it's they who have to pay for that private copy to the companies or to those societies or entities for these rights. So these sources of private companies, these are very young companies, shall we say, in the association work, who work with modern means, let us say with computers, let us say they compile money after distributing it. So therefore, there's no problem here if we do it this way. Let's say we've got nothing to say vis-a-vis how these companies work or associations work. We believe the government and the Spanish government interpreting it doesn't agree with European law, because the private copy is within European legislation. There's jurisprudence within the courts to say and stipulates how this should be carried out. It doesn't surprise me that the Spanish administration doesn't understand the European rules too much, because they're not the only ones. The French, also the French government, with whom I'm in touch with, by the way, doesn't understand things very well at times, be they left-wing or right-wing governments. The same thing happens. The idea is to not analyze the different governments and the parties. Governments, it's very difficult for the governments to understand that European law is the fundamental law vis-a-vis many different issues. It's the fundamental law which decides what has to be done and how it should be done, and we simply, subsequently, what you've got to do is to inspire yourself upon European legislation. But these laws, because I don't want to seem that I'm anti-European at all, no, these European laws are have been decided upon by the governments. It's the governments who define them as well. So therefore, through a consensus with the ministers and legislators, and then subsequently the European Parliament, So therefore, the representatives of the Spanish political parties are also present and involved in these negotiations. So therefore, they're not only European laws that emerge from as some sort of dictatorship or whatever, not at all, which may transcend the democratic order, not at all. So we believe that this way of doing things in the Spanish government should be criticized, should be criticized, and we're going to carry out actions at a European level. And now you may ask me, what type of actions are these going to be? Well, first of all, we're going to continue to making people aware and talking with the politicians. European administration, queda, has done this. The artists, as well as the actors, organized at a European level. We also believe it's very important to make the European authorities aware of how we can resolve the Spanish situation, so that we can readdress, or they can readdress in a reasonable manner, what they're proposing, and so therefore also to correct as well the damages to the right holders. Thank you very much for being here, all of you. Copyright holders, all of you are journalists. You're in a festival with many films that you've got to see. So therefore, thank you very much for taking your time to participate in this meeting. And thank you very much for being so generous, or for your generosity, better said. I insist. Thank you once again.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Well, let's open up a QA. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone want to ask any questions?
Hola, buenos días.
Hi, good morning. I've got many questions, but I'll try to be specific. The tax hasn't existed for, well, 8 months, September 2000, I don't know how long. I would like to know, let's come down to earth. We've heard your words, Mr. Uribe, claiming the protection of the rights of the, but let's go back down to earth. How has this hurt you? How damaged you? How has this hindered you vis-a-vis this tax? And what are they asking for? Because it's a crossroads, a complex crossroads. On the one hand, the tax doesn't exist and that payment has disappeared. And on the other hand, you expect to get paid by the general state budget, that within the economic framework we're in, a situation, it's quite improbable that you'll ever get it, because of the fact the budgets are being reduced more and more every year, so it's not very probable that this will be included in the new budget. What are you asking for? No, not at all. What we're saying, and as I said before, at least, we don't want the state to make taxing people to recover private copies. No, the technology industries who enjoy this, they should pay for it, if you get what I'm saying. That's quite clear. I don't know whether you want to add anything there, Yvonne. Let me intervene just for a couple on more technical side of things that affects Spanish law. What the idea is that we change the system which exists in the rest of the European countries. And what's logical is that we go back to a system that exists in the rest of the European countries. It was changed because we said that compensation was going to be carried out by the general state budget, and months later the state doesn't have any money to pay for that compensation. This is something that's quite logical, and which is what we said at that time. We want to do the same thing that's happening in the rest of Europe. They say to suit your laws to the Padawan source law, and to find a compensation system through which who pays for the damage for private copy are the manufacturers of the equipment and equipment that's used to reproduce it. And in a more indiscriminate way, it shouldn't be paid for, there, shall we say, by all of the Spaniards. End of the day, all of the taxpayers or citizens. Sorry, we can't hear the question. Sorry.
Soy delegado de AISGE, que es la sociedad que gestiona la propiedad intelectual de los actores, y
the decision of the government of paying pittance of 5 million to distribute them all amongst us, I think, is so absurd that it would be to laugh. If it weren't real, it would make you laugh. We in AISGE, we have received through private copy between 5 or 6 and 12 million euros. And with these millions of euros, that seem a lot, but the truth be said, the different associations that manufacture or companies that manufacture and export these products are making in Spain 100 billion euros. 100 billion euros. And of those billions of euros, we demand to pay 0.01%. That is to say, that's just pittance, isn't it? That's small change, really. To give that part of their profits over didn't bring about any imbalance in their balance of payments and their profits. But we don't know why. Well, due to stupid the politics, the government, bearing in mind a tax, there's never been a tax there's no tax for this. It's a word invented by the multinationals. We call it a canon to hide reality. What we have in Spain is a compensation due to the exploitation of our work. That is to say, I make a film, it's shown in the different media, people copy it, and that's it. And there's a very big benefit and profits for the owners of those that have to buy the devices to be able to demand that we buy devices in order to record them as private copies. And the rights, we've lost the rights to this. We've lost between 8 and 12 million euros, of which we were providing aid because the law obliges us to deduct from those, of that compensation money we're paid. It demands deducting 20% to destine it to the promotion and above all, and that's what AISCA wants to do, the protection of our partners. I know there are many actors have died in poverty, and AISCA distributes these profits. We've not been able to have, we've had no cases of elder actors that have died in poverty because we're protecting. There are 605 families of actors who perceive through, or have perceived through private copy, these social aid. What will be of them in the future? I don't know. Okay, and from the support to the festivals through that fund to this festival, Spanish festival, and the struggle and fight against piracy, and the payment of medical insurance that the authors associations, and there's a lot of things that are not being paid for now, but at the end of the day, it's summarized that 115 million euros that was going to be paid to the cultural industry has not been received, so therefore it doesn't receive it by the title holders nor the people for the care, or it just nothing is received at the present moment. It's not being received. Simple as that. I would like to know why, because not only the actors, not only the creators, be they playwright, directors of plays or cinema, we here as journalists, we've got problems, and I write an article. When I write the article of this section, it's very good and it's very beautiful, but it's being published by 20 newspapers, and I don't get paid for, I only get paid by my own newspapers. That is to say, the same thing happens with the ministry in the previous government. They left it to one side because this issue, because they're very afraid of the companies. They're feared against the voters who have computers and who download the films. If I go to the cinema, I imagine a certain percentage will be paid to the distributor, another, and also the author. But here, only the viewer gains everything, has everything to gain by downloading it. I think this issue should be solved, and let's all fight against this piracy and find the right formula, technical police formula and moral formulae in order to try to resolve all of this problem that we've got, because the rest is to just twiddle your fingers at the end of the day, and we're not going anywhere. That's my point of view anyway. Yes, you are completely right. I didn't want to talk too much about piracy, but that's another issue perhaps, which is very complex. But I would say that one of the great problems is that it evolves. The situation is different in each country. There are countries that are much more efficient than others against piracy, fighting against piracy, not only in countries, but there are also industries that are more efficient in that sense as well. As regards cinema, at present, piracy in many countries is linked to places and to illegal websites, and there are rights title holders, but that's the same. These people have to be very efficient in to be able to fight against these pirate websites, to be able to block their download. This is a technique which is starting to be developed more efficiently now to fight against all of this. But as I say, it's a day-to-day job. It should be done every day. But obviously, if we close or down a website of pirate downloads, and sometimes it's very difficult, it takes years to finish off with them. The internet, I think, is formidable, undoubtedly, but we've got an educational problem with vis-a-vis people. Yes, the internet is very interesting, and it opens up a new world to us, but where there are no rules, and so therefore that's why we're seeing all sorts of different behaviors and conducts. This is the beginning of a new economic model as well, a world of that of the far west, so to speak, that we've got to know how to set the rules, but the holders of the copyright holders, for example, I have to work with the European text, and we've worked very hard in this legislature. We started up by making the European Parliament to prepare a clear report establishing what piracy is, where it takes place, how we can respond to it, and to a certain extent the European Parliament, in a very difficult atmosphere, a difficult situation, because politicians are divided vis-a-vis this issue. Some people believe that the internet is a space of freedom and nothing should be done. We have to leave it all as it is, and to evolve as it is. But it's quite curious, because quite often it's not precisely liberal politicians in the lines of the Greens, the Socialists, for example, and even in Sweden and Germany, where supposedly there's a moral message here. It seems that there's people believe that things shouldn't change, but the world is changing. I was reading Le Monde, and it also mentioned of the technological challenge, and the authority of French telecommunications has just recognized that we can regulate the neutrality of the web so that the payment services can have privileged access. All of that mythology that you can't do anything on the internet, all of this mythology, I think that slowly but surely will be reduced and clarified at the end, and there will be ways to regulate piracy as well. This will be developed. The problem is that this takes time, and every day we lose is a day which is gained by the pirates, so to speak, or piracy. And this is in prejudice of cinema and music, obviously, undoubtedly. So therefore, I don't say this to gain time, but what's quite clear is that yes, quite fortunately, things are starting to move in the right direction. From my point of view, with worldization and globalization, there's another problem. We had national techniques, and now there's a globalization process which is incorporated, and we involve the web or network situation where the rules have to be at a European level and even at a world level, and that makes things complicated because we're talking about countries that have different mindsets and mentalities and ways of thinking with different temperaments, so to speak, and that's another challenge. I completely agree with you. Thank you.
Donc, ce serait quoi la démarche à faire pour que...
Therefore, what should we do? What do we have to do so that Spain... We have to change the law, supposedly. We have to try to change the law. Well, I would say that, yes, go back to the beginning, the principle that we had before, and principles that agree with European law, because European law, it's quite clear, when we include private copies in national law, we have to pay and compensate economically because of that prejudice, and to pay according to the prejudice, the damage done. For example, not a small amount. The act of copying is a very important act, because one's going to have a copy at home of a work of art, and compensation, economic compensation, is not going to be the same price that we pay if we bought the DVD at a store. What happens is that European law, I say this quite clearly, if I say there's a private copy in my law, I've got to foresee that it should be paid for. Where there's freedom as regards to the amount of the pay, or what's paid, every country can set that amount in agreement with the beneficiaries, that say authors, producers, and artists, and also with the industrialists or the different industries that manufacture and that equipment or those machines that allow us to make that copy. And they should pay those that manufacture and import the machines and equipment to be able to copy it. And as my colleague has just said quite well, the percentage that is included in that machine which allows them to copy is a very small, minute, very small as regards to the total cost. And above all, because people, when they have certain technical means, can copy and make many copies, an enormous amount of copies. So therefore, I think it's a reasonable principle. I think it's great to have thought, to a certain extent, to think of indemnifying the rights title holders because of the damage done to them. I think it's a principle that I agree with it. I think it's a great principle. I think it's a good idea because it doesn't prevent people from copying it. Just say, well, okay, if you're going to copy something, who helps you to copy, they should pay. Simple as that. So I think it makes sense. It's coherent, don't you think? There's nothing evil in this, is there? I think it's quite straightforward. So it's quite clear. To oblige them and make them pay, the law has to be changed, right? That's quite clear. Simple as that. Yes, that's true. I think there's something that's underlying, which is very dangerous, which is happening now. I think that, to me personally, I would be very interesting that private property should be addressed, because it's a very unfair world that we don't like. The majority of us don't like it. But what seems dangerous to me is that we only question private property of intellectuals, creators, and the cultural industry. Me, from the point of view of the future and the times that we're living, I think this is very dangerous. So therefore, and there's also another aspect which I think is a key aspect, and they say all of these multinationals, none of them have dropped their prices. That money that theoretically could be saved by the consumer, it just simply goes to the profit and loss account, and it's made by great capitalists in the big companies, Korean companies, Japanese, or whatever companies, etc. When this money, apart from the social work, which is high with, of all of the different management entities, this should go into the pockets of the creators of cultural works. This money hasn't been recovered, and I think that I don't understand the decision of the government, because a lawyer said that it's almost prevarication, and that's a bit powerful, isn't it, to say, but if we appeal, they're going to lose. The state lawyers know this, because it's a community European modern right, harmonized, shall we say, and only in this country, which in this aspect is so retrograde in what it's doing, we're losing everything that we had advanced in the past to be able to understand what's going on. I'm just going to give you an idea, and that is that the rules that existed, which were a few cents vis-a-vis the CDs and DVDs, to enable, not repressively, that is to say that you can even make your copy of the record that you bought to have it, and even give it to friends, so that you can have it in your car to listen to, or in the office, so that you can hear it in there. I think the formula, economically, we should discuss it, obviously, how much that should be compensated with economically, but it wasn't repressive. There's not that you'd have the police punishing you because you're breaking the law from a property that's not important. You're worried about only being stolen, being robbed at home, but robbing an author isn't serious, because they've always been the clowns of society, so to speak, and that's the case. So therefore, it's something which is truly unfortunate and regrettable, and I think the measure was correct. I don't understand how the government puts indiscriminately on the citizens another tax which is completely unfair, then create a consumption and payment for a few cents. That's say these are rights which are fair. That you have a property, you set an amount through the appearance in modern equipment. It's not. The truth is not turning things around. It provides a solution so that technology advances, which is comfortable and good for all of us, but it shouldn't be at the cost of the rights of other people. In that sense, there's an enormous amount of work vis-a-vis citizens' education. That is to say, people should become aware that you can't steal and copy things just like you can't steal a car or you can't steal something in a store or a warehouse. If you deem, last question, and we will close because I'm sure we all want to enjoy your presence, as I say in Mineo, which is the cocktail now, which will be held on your right as you leave. Yes, that part, what you've said, I think that would be great, but it seems I go to the movies and quite often, and I laugh, what can I say when they say, listen, if you copy, you get put in jail, it says, what makes me laugh, it says, I pay to watch a film, not for the police to be there if I'm going to make a copy. So we've got to regulate this to not leave it if I'm going to be a good person. I don't download films. I'm a good guy, for example, if you get what I'm saying. But other people do download them. Isn't there a way of surveillance on the internet to say, well, if you don't, you can download whatever you want. But this is like freedom of expression when the TVs couldn't report. Only news could be shown by the Spanish national TV or public TV. No, pay the journalist or a builder or a constructor. You want to talk or inform about what you want to do so that you can address whatever issue. But you've got to pay. There's got to be a way within the internet for that person who downloads films, whatever the money, I'm not going to say how much, but they should pay what they download, period. The rest, you can, well, be good, but I'll be good if I want to. And surveillance, I'm not prepared to check to see whether the next guy is copying the film next to me, because I'm watching the film. That's why I paid for. I'm not going to be a cop in the cinema theater. No, I wasn't referring so much about surveillance, but to be aware that cultural products are owned by some people and you have to pay for them. Simple as that. In order to conclude, it seems to me that the most advanced countries, we are working to improve private copies because people copy, and that's a fact. That's okay. And what we're thinking about also is in those countries that think more, Google, for example, sometimes we don't pay taxes, we don't pay VAT in certain countries. Well, these are ideas that we're working with in France, and my intention is to ask the people responsible in Europe, to the lawyers and tax experts, that there's a loss of taxes in Germany, in England and in France due to the fact that Google and YouTube are in those countries, obviously, but there's also a challenge before us that we have to respond to. And I think that in Spain, if we suppress or changing this situation, we're not bearing in mind all of the people who are going to suffer the consequences, and not only the authors, but also the principle to regulate the economy of the country is what's being affected. And for me, it just doesn't make sense from an historical standpoint. And we have to say this. It's a scandal from my point of view. That's not the direction we should progress in. It's quite clear. Thank you very much to everyone, Imanol and Yvonne. We have a cocktail as you leave on the right. Thank you very much.